Greetings, Guardians. My name is Byfear. As you can probably hear, I'm starting to lose my voice. What great timing. I'm going to keep pushing through with videos as best I can, but do excuse me if this is a little bit shorter than you would be expected for, and yeah, this is also just a more off-the-cuff first impressions of the dungeon. So, with that said, as you might expect, spoiler warning, let's jump in. Warlord's Ruin. I think it's fair to say that this first impressions cannot be counted on as a review. And the reason I say that is because there is a lot that still needs to be uncovered. I've not completed the quest, I've only done one run-through of this, and it's clear that multiple run-throughs are required. This place feels, I can't confirm this, but it feels like it has layers that need to be peeled back before you can see the full story of what happened. There are some bits that are missing, but I fear I may be casting judgment too soon. If it turns out that this is all that there really is and that everything else is honestly just surface level, then yeah, this is kind of disappointing. But I really don't think that's the case. I still have a lot to complete and a lot to go through, so do not count this as a review. It is far too early to be passing judgment at this time. Having said that, I'm going to break down the bits and pieces that I did enjoy and found about the dungeon into kind of the vague areas of things. So we're going to talk story, theme, environment, and lore. Some things are very good, and some things I think could be really good, but are potentially just missing things at the moment. Maybe one of them is a trade-off for the absence of another. I really hope not. If everything does hit the marks when all the layers are peeled away, this could potentially be one of the best dungeons in terms of lore that we've ever had. But I think that it doesn't necessarily conquer the crazy potential damage that would have been done if everything panned out in Ghosts of the Deep. That was a truly pressing threat. This, I think, is still lower than that, but it still has an excellent story to it, as best I can tell. Moving on to that, story, let's start there. It looks like this has a lot of excellent potential, partly because it has an 8-part quest. That 8-step quest seems to give us more reasons to run through the dungeon more than just once, and as a result, it seems as though we need to reveal things the further and the deeper we go. Now, with that being said, the main dungeon quest line looks as though you have to retrieve a bunch of different things for it, so maybe it reveals a bunch of other stuff. Of course, Ahamkara can communicate beyond death, so it's not too infeasible that you could actually, in canon, have to do multiple runs of this. After a single run, I can only say that this has potential and that, well, that should be the important takeaway of it. An 8-step quest is still ahead of me, and I need to finish that before I can give you the full conclusion. But the vague idea of the story in the first place, that we've missed a dragon, that the Scorn are trying to manipulate with the use of wish magic, that they're even praying and worshipping to the Ahamkara in the first place, it provides a compelling hook, as does the central dragon at the heart of all of this. That actually is all I can say on story for the moment. It looks good, but there's still so much I need to uncover. Play through it multiple times, get that quest done, then you'll get a better idea of things. I do still think that the central tenets of the actual story that seem to center around a warlord known as Name and the Ahamkara Hefend, those could be really strong. There are some other things that just generally aren't explored. Who is the individual that ruined this warlord? Potentially Hefend, potentially something else. Why are there House of Kings banners? What the hell are the Scorn doing here and what drew them here? There's a lot of unanswered questions, including who killed Hefend. So, yeah, lots still to uncover, but it's clear that I've not done enough digging after this first impressions from one run. The thing I can absolutely tell you a lot about is the theming of this dungeon, and regardless of whatever successes or failures this dungeon has, for everything else, the theme is clearly a 10 out of 10. It is D&D inspired, and it hits all the good tropes. You've got mimics, you've got traps, you've got dungeons, you've got a dragon at the center of its story, you've got undead knights. In fact, you have a lot of undead with the Scorn generally, and you have a boss that looks like a beholder. All on theme, all on par, excellent. It truly does feel as though it's kind of like a D&D inspired 3-shot that you might run at a table. If that was the theme and thing they were going for at this, then yeah, they absolutely succeeded. I'd want to go ahead and clap for the person who actually went ahead and created this theme and gave the base idea of, hey, why don't we just make a D&D inspired dungeon? In fact, that gets my approval award of me saying, hey, that's pretty neat. Even getting thrown into jail at a certain point and having to escape, yeah, that feels incredibly D&D-esque as well. It's also really nice to see the Iron Lord kind of theming return, which is not only appropriate for the D&D mixings in, but also I'm just a real fan of that aesthetic and that theme generally, so that's a huge boon too. Moving on to environment, this is kind of reaching into similar things. It's kind of what you expect. It's a big old castle on a cold mountain, and that's nothing revolutionary, but they do it very well. It's a great complement to the theme, and the environmental storytelling, which is more of the focus of this, is also what's really on par. At its best, I think it is centered around those D&D themes. For example, there's a dead body that you can see which is just next to a spike trap in the walls. There are skeletons pointing to clues within the dungeon section where you get thrown into jail. You know, that's all pretty good stuff, and that's on par for what I'd expect. The Dark Age vibes and the reminders of many other Destiny time periods are there too. There is Scorn worshipping the remains of the Ahamkara, which is very appropriate for the present. There is, of course, the fact that this is all fallen into Dark Age history, with the castle being somewhere where a warlord once stood. And then, of course, there are the House of Kings banners, which makes me question if there's an unspoken third time period here. Very uncertain. I do also love the final boss arena, bones and all. That looks fantastic. Let's be clear, this is no Vow of the Disciple. The Vow of the Disciple took environmental storytelling in Destiny to a whole other level, and I think that's something which is highly deserving of having its own glory pointed out, but, you know, this is okay. I would not call this excellent. I would call it very good, but I would not say that it's anywhere close to what Vow does. Vow has meaning within its environment that we could still pick apart to this day, and it's been over 2 years at this point almost. So, yeah, there's a lot of waiting we'd still want to do to find anything that comes even close to cracking the environmental storytelling of that, but in the meantime, this is still a very cool environment for the story to be told in, and where they need and could have environmental storytelling, they do, and it looks really good. Now, as for the lore, this is the bit that has me a little bit worried, but again, it's why I'm glad that there are still clearly layers to peel away from this dungeon, and this is why I frame this as a first impressions and not a review. Whilst it's really clear that the dungeon has a deeper story that still needs to be picked apart, at the moment, from where I stand, seeing all the lore tabs of things, there is a serious lack of lore. Now, this is just a first assessment. It's entirely possible that this place has a lore book. In fact, I've heard rumor, and this is only rumor, so don't take this to be true, that there are Ahamkara bones you can collect throughout the dungeon. And if that's true, maybe that's how you unlock the lore book. Again, unconfirmed notes, I don't know if that's true at all or if that's just hearsay, but the point is, if you can unlock a lore book for this place, then yeah, we've got some excellent lore going on here, and I'd love to go ahead and see what's going on with that. However, there are very few lore tabs attached to this, which means that we actually get very little context off the bat. It's entirely possible that that's by the nature of this, but if there are no lore tabs that are attached to it, I think that's actually a huge whiff. And if this is all the lore we get, then it ends up that we have maybe 2 lore tabs. One from the exotic ghost shell, and if there is a exotic attached to all of this, then we'd get one from there too. But that's 2 lore tabs. Ghosts of the Deep, for context, had 4 lore tabs with each of the weapons, which gave us context on the last few days being spent on the arcologies, and the armor pieces gave us context on the retrieval of Oryx's remains by the Hidden, and it gave us fascinating details about Oryx's body, potentially having some semblance of life still to it, even in this moment. That was awesome, and that was some of the best lore of Ghosts of the Deep. Take it back one more and look at Spire of the Watcher, and we got details about Anna Bray's fireteam, which were absolutely fascinating. There was a moment where a ghost took over a Guardian's body and used it to cast a super because its connection to the light was stronger than that of the Guardian, which in itself poses fascinating questions. But ultimately it leaves us in this place of like, okay, where do we go from there? That's a huge open-ended enigma that gets added out of nowhere. And then, of course, there's everything in Spire of the Watcher to do with Soteria. This was kind of important for the lore in Spire of the Watcher to be so dense, though, because it's a Vex dungeon for the most part, and as a result, it's kind of hard to make a compelling antagonist out of the Vex. This dungeon lacking lore tabs feels like a mistake, unless there's a lore book that makes up for all of this that I'm just missing because this is a first impressions. But if it is the case that if there is an exotic and it's just that and the exotic ghost shell that have lore tabs, enormous whiff. I don't understand what the hell's going on there. That's why I'm holding out hope for this, because I still haven't done the quest, and it's clear that there are multiple explorations that need to be done. The secrets of this place are barely touched at the moment, so we need to really figure it all out. However, if that is the case, and if there is a lore book, maybe it saves it. But I still would have wanted to see lore tabs on these weapons. It's cool to sit there and see some of the names. I mean, Dragon Cult Sickle is the name of the sword that you get. That in itself begs explanation and clarity and context. I mean, you have an awesome name to all of that, but then I know nothing about the Dragon Cult itself. I mean, was that attached to the Scorn because they're worshipping it? Or is that maybe something to do with the House of Kings that were there? Is that to do with the Iron Lords, or is that to do with the Warlord that came along? What's going on here? Please, I want to know more, and you leave me with these context notes, but no actual clues to them. This is irritating, not the least because it sits there and reminds me a little bit of the level of lore that we got in Destiny 1. I don't want to sit there and say that's the case for this dungeon, because I don't think that we're going to be lacking a lore book here, but I don't know. And if there are only 2 lore tabs to this place, huge fall on the lore. That's really not good. But it's still a first impression, I don't know. In conclusion, this dungeon clearly has layers, and I imagine that the reason I'm not seeing as much is that those layers need to be peeled away. I can tell you on the surface level it's fun and it has a compelling central plot, which will definitely get me making some video content when I'm done here with the dungeon. We need to wait and see if it's really good when I've collected everything. There are still potentially quest steps that lead to this being a more dynamic story, but the one glaring thing that I absolutely need to go ahead and point out as feedback for the narrative team right away is, please, don't take away those lore tabs on the things. If you can write them, do it, because if there's a lore book and that's the replacement for it, cool, that's fine. But I think that lore attached to a book is one thing if it's structured well. I think it's much better when you can attach it to the various weapons that might give additional context. And of course, the armor set means that you can tell a 5-part narrative that might be somewhat detached from all of that. It was done really well in Ghosts of the Deep, in my opinion, even if the actual narrative from the Golden Age perspective wasn't as interesting to me. I can openly sit there and admit that if we sat there and had the whole story of the Dragon Cult being told through the weapons, and then maybe a story from a different perspective and time period being told through the armor, that would be good. But the armor and weapons don't have lore tabs at the moment, so yeah, that's the glaring thing I need to sit there and investigate. First impressions only, I don't want to render a final judgment here. It looks as though there's solid potential. We still need to investigate more of it, and I am going to stop recording this video so that I don't lose my voice. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed, go ahead and do all the typical stuff, leave a like, expect more content in the coming days, and as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, has been quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Horodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.